the very freedom of the gospel is now at stake. And there is a spiritual attack and agenda to shut down your voice and mine.
A couple of years ago, the church I go to cancelled its Sunday morning meeting, and we went along to a conference in the Usher Hall instead, organised by another church down the road, by Destiny Church. And I think that was maybe going to be happening this year as well. My church, I don't know, probably would have gone as well, so I would have been going as well. Only this time it's not happening in the Usher Hall, because Edinburgh City Council has banned it from taking place. Now that really brings it close to home. When a Christian event that I went to a couple of years ago, probably will be going to this time, has been banned by the City Council. That's quite sobering. Now obviously you'll be familiar with the story about Franklin Graham's event being banned by Glasgow City Council at the SEC, and some people have been saying, this is a real watershed moment for religious freedom in Scotland. Well, I'm not quite so sure. This is hardly the first time something like this has happened. A few years ago, the South African evangelist Angus Buchan had some events in the Scottish borders. Some of them were in council facilities, and LGBT activists started complaining, saying he believes this, that and the other, he says this, that and the other. Often they don't provide quotations, they just report their sort of misinterpretation of what he's saying. Anyway, but the real issue is basically he doesn't agree with the LGBT agenda hook, line and sinker. So they complained to the council stopped it. The local SNP MSPs were right behind the decision. One of the MSPs behind it was Joan McAlpine. Now that's quite interesting. Because at the moment Joan McAlpine is maybe the MSP most prominent for opposing the Gender Recognition Act. And she's getting a lot of abuse for that. People are trying to get her fired and shut up by all sorts of ways. But on the other hand, what goes around comes around. That's the way she treated people she disagreed with. So she's now on the receiving end of similar treatment, which of course is not right. But on the other hand, she hasn't got a leg to stand on when she's complaining about it. Anyway, when the council cancelled Angus Buchan, I wrote a letter to the Scotsman. It's published in the Scotsman, I think in the Southern Reporter as well, saying this is not right. There should be freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and if this man wants to come and preach and people want to go and listen to him, then the council should make its facilities available the same as it would for any other group in the community. And someone complained about that, and they wrote a letter to the school where I was working at the time. The letter was only about 2 sentences long. It was anonymous, and it said, outraged by this teacher's beliefs, would a gay pupil in his class be safe? I mean, what a stupid thing to say. Anyway, that's what they said. So they basically called for me to be fired. And so I was called to see the headmaster. The headmaster said, we've had this letter. This person says you should be fired. Well, as you can imagine, that's quite a stressful meeting to have. And when you find yourself in that situation, you just have to hope that your employer's got a bit of moral backbone and principle. Because if they haven't, you might actually find yourself being fired. But either way, it's not the most pleasant experience. Now, apparently Angus Buchan did come to the borders. He ended up having one of his meetings in a field because the council cancelled the venue. So I stood up for him publicly, paid a small price for it in terms of a bit of backlash and a bit of stress. But I'm glad that I did. Who else stood up for him? Who else spoke out about it at the time? I'm sure David Robertson did. I'm pretty sure he did. I don't know if anyone else did, but I'm glad that I did. I think it was the right thing to do. As the Scottish Family Party, we've had venues cancel on us, hotels, community centres. Activists complain at them, and generally often they're sort of weak-minded and unprincipled, and they just think, at least line of resistance, let's just cancel them. So the issue with Franklin Graham, say that there have been other similar issues, but it is a huge issue, and it's been the same across Britain as well. So again, those of you who might be under the Conservative illusion, thinking, things are really bad because of the SNP, if only the Conservatives were in charge, this sort of thing wouldn't happen. The same thing's happening in England as well. Now, the little clip I showed you at the start of this video was Andrew Owen, who's the leader of Destiny Church. And Destiny Church have been involved in organising Franklin Graham coming to Scotland, and also organising the conference in Edinburgh that Edinburgh City Council has banned. Edinburgh and Glasgow City Council, both SNP led, by the way. Now, just to make it clear, Andrew Owen, I've never met him. I haven't met Peter Anderson, the Destiny leader in Edinburgh either. I haven't had any contact with them in making this video. I'm now going to show you a clip of the bigoted hate preacher Andrew Owen whipping up his followers into a frenzy of aggression with a vicious anti-gay tirade.
God loves every person on this planet. whatever race or nationality you are, whichever way you vote, whatever your age, whatever your sexual preference, I want to tell you, God loves you. He is for you, and his heart is open. His arms are open to receive you, whoever you are. And the truth is, we all stand in the same place as sinners needing to be saved, right? I haven't met that perfect person yet, other than Jesus.
That's just to show the way that activists, campaigners, journalists, whatever, can try and build up a picture of individuals and of churches that's completely divorced from the truth. And they rely on preventing people from actually hearing the likes of Andrew Owen. Because if people actually hear them, they realise that they're thoroughly decent people. So let's hear a bit more from Andrew Owen.
With Franklin Graham coming here, I think it's deeply regrettable that Glasgow City Council in particular, with its leader Susan Aiken, decided that they were going to cancel Franklin Graham's event. And on the back of that, one reporter who's been constantly hounding us for many years, and other Christians too, began to dig into our Surge conference and dug deeply into books being written by some of our guest speakers, presented a file to the Usher Hall as the only complaint, and the Usher Hall then reacted and chose to cancel our Surge venue for June. Both the events, the Franklin Graham event and the Surge event, is nothing to do with LGBTQ issues. As we journey forward, it is not for us to speak against anybody, but it is neither for us to lay down and be walked all over.
Quite right, the church shouldn't let itself be walked over. Now when it says it's not for them to speak against anyone, I can sort of see where it's coming from there. It's a church, but the problem here is with SNP-led councils. But it's not the job of the church to become political. But as the Scottish Family Party, that is our job. Because that's the way democracy works. If you don't like the current lot of councils, MSPs, if you don't like what they're doing, the idea of democracy is you vote for different ones. So speaking against political opponents is a vital part of the democratic process, and we'll do that on this issue, against those who have enacted the ban and also against those who are failing to stand up against it.
They said, if you cancel Larry Stockstill, we'll consider letting you continue in the venue. What would you do? So we spoke to Larry, and Larry graciously said, I'm willing to withdraw if it brings peace and help. But our apostolic team, over a year ago, when we were praying for this event, felt that he was to come, and so he's coming.
Good decision. If you start backing down, it never stops. Where's it going to end? You have to submit your Sunday sermons for approval. We've got to reject the authority of the state to be arbiter on religious matters. So, correct decision.
One of the other people that were mentioned in our Times article was Gavin Calver, who is also one of our guest speakers. Gavin is the head of the Evangelical Alliance. He represents 6,000 churches, hundreds of thousands of people.
So objecting to the head of the Evangelical Alliance, an absolutely mainstream figure in UK Christianity. This is getting closer and closer to the church down the road from you.
To me, there's lots of challenges and sadnesses in it. Here's one of the sadnesses. There are Christian politicians saying nothing. They're afraid of the impact from the LGBTQ community back on them. Well, I'm afraid the day of saying nothing has gone. It's gone. And so if you are a businessman or a politician or a leader of influence and you stay silent, heaven notes your silence. And don't think you will be exempted, because when they come for us, they're coming for you. And we need, at this point, to find our voice and to speak up.
And I hear people saying, isn't it great, isn't it wonderful, we've got so many Christian MSPs, councillors in the main parties. But where are they? And maybe some have spoken out clearly. If they have, I've missed it. So is Andrew Owen. John Mason seemed to defend the decision to cancel the event for Franklin Graham, but then he has written to the council asking for clarification, but that's hardly objecting to it. Now I think it's very easy, if you're say a Christian MSP or a council or whatever, to give an interview where you say, my values come from my faith. What's harder is to stand up for them when there's a price to pay. When you've got a choice between having a quiet week, building your career, enjoying the status and rewards of being elected representative, or to defend the freedom of your fellow Christians and have a tough week with unknown consequences. Now I think a lot of the Christian politicians, they say, oh, we have to be wise, this is not the right battle. But the problem is it's easy to get into the mindset when it's never the right battle and just blend in with what's going on and avoiding every area where your career might suffer if you actually speak out about it. Now, with regard to this issue with, say, Franklin Graham, there are 4 basic positions a politician could take. They could agree with the ban, which quite a lot of them do. They could say, well, they just don't care really, or they're too scared, so they're going to keep silent. That's number 2. Number 3, you could say, I don't really know anything about Franklin Graham, but we need to defend freedom of speech. It's not up to the council to decide which Christians are allowed to speak or not. Or 4, you could actually say, I agree with what Franklin Graham was saying, that's what I believe too, so that's especially ridiculous that you're banning him from there. Now, if there can be some politicians saying something along the lines of number 4, that's best, but at the very least, defending freedom of speech should be something that politicians are willing to speak out about. But no, we just get 1 or 2, agreement with the ban, or don't care, too scared to say, can't be bothered with it, or whatever. It's also a good point that Christian politicians are currently keep their heads down, being super careful, being wise, as they might see it. Eventually, their day will come. Eventually, someone will stuff a microphone under their nose and say, do you think homosexual sex is sinful? And then they've got a choice. They either lie, or they face the wrath of the political media establishment. And when that happens, who will spring to their defence? We will, as the Scottish Family Party. Despite the fact that when the same things happen to other people, they haven't spoken out to defend them.
This is our day. But church, you're going to have to be strong. You're going to have to be bold. And this is not the time to sit back. I'm afraid the time of coming to be wishy-washy on your faith is over. We now have to stand up.
He's right. It's time for the church to wake up to what's going on. In fact, it's time for all faith groups to wake up. In fact, it's time for anyone with socially conservative views to wake up. The real issue here is about freedom of speech and resisting bullying LGBT activists. To emphasise at this point, the Scottish Family Party is not a Christian party. You may think all of Christian theology is complete nonsense, as some people in the Scottish Family Party do, but we unite to defend freedom. Right, we're now going to have a listen to Franklin Graham. And bear in mind that Glasgow City Council leader said that she thought letting this man speak in Glasgow might have been illegal.
I'm disappointed because our government is recognizing sin. This court is endorsing sin. And that's what homosexuality is. It's a sin against God, just like any other sin. But for the court to endorse sin, I'm saddened for our country. And so we'll have to go by with what the court says. But as far as for me, I will never recognize it in my heart because God gave marriage between a man and a woman, and that's what marriage is. Then also is there going to be discrimination against churches, against organizations like what I represent, who going to stand by the biblical definition of marriage, or will we be discriminated against by the government?
Well, the answer is obviously yes, at least in the United Kingdom and in Scotland. So where are we heading with this? Things carry on where we're going. Let's say your church wants a new building or an extension. You apply for planning permission. Someone objects on the grounds that you're a bunch of bigots. What does the council do? Do they think, oh, fair point. Maybe it's fair enough that they don't want that sort of group in their area, or maybe it's even illegal to allow that sort of group to have a building. Maybe we won't let them. How about children's work? If your church has a children's ministry of some sort. People might think that you're presenting a message totally at odds with what's taught at school. And the council, the government might think, well, that's not on. We're not going to allow that. It's easy to foresee. Charitable status. I mean, my view is churches that hold to biblical teachings, basically they can forget that. I mean, its days are numbered. But, let's wait and see. What's already starting to happen is if you want to have any sort of job or career in the NHS, or working in a state school, or any sort of school, or social work, basically anything regulated by the state, it's going to be impossible if you hold traditional Christian values. And so younger people now are going to find that's increasingly difficult to pursue these careers. That's a very big deal. Hate speech legislation is on its way. So that one will start to see people prosecuted for presenting basic Christian truths. What we'll have very soon is hostile activists will come to your church and they will sit on the back row with a notepad or recording on their phone. Then they'll report it to the authorities. Who knows what might happen? The preacher might be prosecuted. Maybe he'll be banned from preaching. Maybe the church will get a warning. Who knows? Eventually, maybe churches will be shut down. Local Christian bookshop. How long before someone says that's a purveyor of hate literature? And then maybe the council will shut it down. Christian charities that work, for example, with the homeless, that currently have government funding to do that work. You can easily see that that's going to finish the way we're heading. Fostering and adoption. If you go along now, even if you go along wanting to foster or adopt children, the council, the social workers, whatever, are quite likely to take a pretty dim view of it if you hold traditional Christian values. So if they think people who hold traditional Christian values are not fit to bring up other people's kids, why should they think they're fit to bring up their own kids? And you can see where that's going to lead to as well. Now, when this issue has been discussed, one SNP, MSP tried to say, well, this is not really an SNP issue. That's a bit unfair. No, it's not. It is. This is to SNP-led councils. Christians voting for the SNP are like turkeys voting for Christmas. Are the other parties any better? Well, no, not really. The Greens probably will be even worse. Now, a lot of people in these situations, like the knee-jerk response, they think the obvious thing to do, you write to the council, you write to the MSP. Does it really make much difference? Are you really going to change their fundamental principles? Are you going to change their mindset? Okay, you might just restrain them a bit on this decision, but it's not going to change the direction of travel. We're a democracy. The real power you wield is on election day. Put representatives into the council, into the parliament that you don't need to write to. If the Scottish Family Party had MSPs in the parliament when this issue came up with Franklin Graham, with Destiny Church, we would have been coming to Destiny Church and saying, right, how can we help? And this would have been brought up at First Minister's questions. Nicola Sturgeon would have been put on the spot about these appalling restrictions on religious freedom in Scotland. Is that what you want? If that's what you want, you've got to vote for it. In the meantime, we're making our feelings known to the Scottish public. As Andrew said, we're not just going to lie down and submit. So we're having a demonstration in Glasgow on Saturday the 15th of February. It's short, just from 11 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. outside the Glasgow City Council offices in George Square. There'll be a few very brief speeches. We'll have some placards. We can stand as a group, have some photographs taken. We've got some other fun activities as well. And this is a Scottish Family Party event, but it's not just for our supporters. Anyone wanting to defend our basic freedoms is more than welcome. So hope to see you there. One last thing, we're weatherproof. No matter what the weather's doing, we're going to be there making our points. So hope you can join us. Thanks for watching.